Hello, and welcome to CACS 2020 North America. My name is Kevin Jackson. I am the CEO and CISO of V Cyber Services, LLC, and it is my pleasure to present to you this breakout session, the Virtual CISO, the Future of Cyber Strategy. Our learning objectives for today, we're going to understand the definition of the Virtual Chief Information Security Officer concept within the modern cybersecurity marketplace. We're going to understand the value proposition of vCISO usage. We're going to try to understand the cyber strategy impacts of virtual CISO usage within modern corporate management teams. And finally, we're going to understand how the challenges of future cybersecurity management can be more successfully addressed by the addition of virtual CISOs within almost any cybersecurity team. Let's begin by discussing the rise of the corporate CISO. Now, in this environment here at CACS 2020, it's probably not news to anyone that the corporate chief information security officer has become a critical role within industries across almost all areas of the world. We have quotes such as Bruno Herring, director of cybersecurity from PricewaterhouseCoopers, who said, "Finally, we're seeing that nearly everyone understands security is a business risk issue at the end of the day," which is true and honestly is maybe an understatement because it's become such a critical business risk issue when it comes to business management. We also had Forbes magazine quoted as saying, "Security will need to integrate into the operations of a business, that is, if it is to become an enabler rather than a blocker of innovation." Unfortunately, information security over the past 10 to 15 years has earned a little bit of a reputation as being more of an inhibitor of progress and business process than an enabler. But the criticality of protecting and supporting business operations from cybersecurity threats has now changed that landscape a little bit to where it's more and more understood that whatever it takes to make security become an enabler while being a protector must be invested in. And then we had CSO Online, a great magazine for cybersecurity topics, saying businesses with a CISO in place recorded the highest levels of confidence in their security stance, both in terms of optimization and clarity. Optimization is critical, but clarity may be even the larger topic still. So the question is when, not if, to hire a chief information security officer, and that also from Forbes magazine. The concept of having a professional in place who's going to manage and direct an entire cybersecurity program for your enterprise is now very much mainstream and very much the status quo. So what does a chief information security officer really do? What has the rise of the corporate CISO led to functionally for this role? Well, a CISO is the one who collaborates enterprise-wide to design and document cybersecurity strategy. Now, to be perfectly honest, in many situations, this ends up being someone who designs and documents cybersecurity tactics. Tactics are important, but the ideal CISO is one who also manages cyber strategy, which is quite different from the more day-to-day operational and tactically focused cybersecurity requirements of most businesses. The ideal CISO also manages cybersecurity program tactical implementation in the day-to-day. So they're not only strategic, they are managing the entire gamut of cybersecurity requirements, from the very strategic, from the reporting, the metrics and compliance issues, all the way down to the very day-to-day and very infrastructure, hardware and systems and data-oriented aspects of cybersecurity. The CISO is one who balances information security compliance requirements with the operational needs of the business. This is the person who ideally is tasked with making sure that cybersecurity not only protects the business, but also enables the business as opposed to being a prohibitor of any particular business process or progress. The CISO integrates business processes, technologies, and human factors-centric cybersecurity factors into their approach. From my perspective, this is the very definition of a cyber strategy. A strategy takes a look at all of the dimensions of cybersecurity. Again, business processes, exactly how operations occur on a daily basis from the business side of the house, technology, systems, and data, And then, and please never leave this out, human factors. The human factor-centric nature of so many parts of cybersecurity cannot be ignored. So a very good and comprehensive cybersecurity strategy managed by a very talented CISO will balance all these aspects in a way that reflects the needs, the requirements of each individual enterprise. Maybe your enterprise has a very strong need for technology and data protections, but the human factors aren't as critical, maybe because there's a lot of very well-versed cybersecurity personnel who know the basics of daily operational security for cyber. Or maybe it's all about compliance and business processes in a given environment. And so that more of an emphasis would be placed on those aspects of the cybersecurity strategy. And finally, an ideal CISO understands the nature of cybersecurity as a risk management function. That might be the most critical single aspect of what a CISO does. Understanding risk in cyber, in information, in data, in collaboration, in everything from internet websites to mobile phones, and being able to categorize and structure cybersecurity approaches as risk management functions that make sense then to the rest of the C-suite and to the board of directors, as well as being directly translatable into cybersecurity tactics for IT teams and for end users, for sales staff, for those who are actually making the business happen. All these aspects are critical to keeping large and complex businesses cyber safe, right? Well, maybe not. That's no longer true, is it? That was a setup. Cybersecurity matters to every business now. No longer just the large and complex enterprises that used to be the sole owner of CISO or Chief Information Security Officer level roles. It's no longer large and complex businesses. The nature of the threat that we deal with nowadays, and again in this environment within this conference, within CACS 2020, I know very many of you are well aware, the nature of the threat is not only ever changing, ever growing, but it's omnidirectional and in some ways omnipresent. The nature of connected operations has changed so dramatically over the past several decades and is now changing almost as rapidly as data grows worldwide. It's ever growing in scope and it's ever growing in sophistication. The nature of compliance is no less significant. Compliance has accelerated at a phenomenal rate. The reach of compliance requirements, from privacy to data protection to internal compliance to financial compliance, the impact of such compliance requirements cannot be overstated, and how businesses must dynamically and often very rapidly adapt how they approach information security in order to make sure they can succeed in a compliance-related environment. Obviously, this is more critical to some industries than others, but the areas of business where it matters tremendously. And then you take all of those issues and you overlay that with one really important fact. Cyber expertise is sorely lacking. Now, I could have inserted 2 or 3 slides at this point, just citing article after article from major publications and newspapers discussing the phenomenal shortage in cybersecurity expertise nationwide, worldwide. There is such a lack. There are millions of positions open for cybersecurity experts. Many companies are doing their best to reallocate resources from other areas of technology, of business management, of risk management to train new cybersecurity personnel. That's fine, of course, in the near term for practitioners and for tacticians, for operations-focused personnel. But how do you get the CISO level, the Chief Information Security Officer level strategy expertise? All of the experience required to make that level of business management operate successfully. So you combine all of these aspects and the risks, the issues are growing. To say daily, unfortunately, might be an understatement. They're growing by the second. The challenges scale, again, for different enterprises, but they are still very real challenges. In some environments, it's gotten to the point where it becomes always a chasing after the goal operation. You're not getting ahead at any point in time, but always lagging behind and reacting for cybersecurity because the threats are so great. The compliance requirements are so enormous. And the ability to address all of this from a strategic and expert level is so hard to find. Businesses across the spectrum can benefit from what CISOs offer, but the CISOs, unfortunately, are very hard to come by. So let's talk a little bit more about that. CISO level talent is not only rare, but as a natural corollary to being rare, it is expensive. More than half of organizations report a problematic cybersecurity skills shortage, and there is no end in sight, says CSO Online. The talent gap is an industry crisis, says Forbes. Salaries for cybersecurity professionals have risen by 6% in 1 year, doubling the national average of 2.9%. And I'm here to tell you right now, that is now an old number. Those numbers are even greater from 2019 into 2020. We're looking at 10% increases and possibly almost larger than that when you balance out what is happening here in 2020 with the rise of COVID-19. A lot of industries, of course, are suffering greatly from a lack of revenue and lack of personnel and just all of the pain and suffering that's come with this worldwide pandemic. But one thing that I've seen, and I believe a lot of other cybersecurity professionals have seen, is that the changes that have been required from a business operations perspective to manage the global pandemic have increased the need for expert-level cybersecurity expertise in the execution, mostly, of business continuity plans. There now is a new term that I would like to very widely announce, and that is secure business continuity. Of what value is your business continuity plan if, in fact, it is a very insecure and risky business continuity plan? Secure business continuity is now the name of the game. And a lot of this last several months, I personally have spent working with clients, helping them operate in a secure fashion during their business continuity program activation and during this mass transitions to work from home across, again, almost any industry. Back, however, to talking about salary and the rareness of the appropriate talent. The median annual salary range, this is already an old number, but coming out of 2018, the median annual salary was $215,000 plus. That did not count bonuses and benefits for full-time CISOs. That range number here as well, that is now very much antiquated. You can add $15,000 perhaps to those numbers. When rare talent is the name of the game, expensive talent becomes the norm. And the need in every aspect is just continuing to grow. So, what does this mean when you look at the practical impacts of these realities on the business environment around the world? Well, many small and medium-sized businesses are completely left out of the picture. Cyber in those environments and mid-sized businesses are the most numerous type of business in the world. Mid-sized businesses are a very, very wide range from the just past very small up into just below giant size and large businesses, and they are everywhere. In those environments where a salary like that, a requirement like that may not make sense, but where all of the risks and issues of cybersecurity are still prevalent, they're usually forced to have their cybersecurity posture and program managed by their CIO or by their director of IT or by a cybersecurity engineer or a tactician who is brought on board. In best case, you may have a manager or a director of cybersecurity or information assurance, someone who is well below the experience level and the application level of a true CISO, but who in some ways at least has a defined and focused title of dealing with information security. The problem? Most of these people also have day jobs. Cybersecurity and information management is not their only job. And none of those people are true C-level, Chief Information Security Officer level managers. They're not necessarily cyber strategists. This leads to that inevitable conclusion I mentioned a few minutes ago. You're always chasing after the goal of running behind, putting out fires, and just trying frantically to keep up with change, risk, and operational security without any view into cyber strategy, with any view into the true risk management needs of cybersecurity. This is an unfortunate truth for absolutely the majority of businesses that make up this vast swath of small and mid-sized businesses worldwide. It's from this very real-world problem that the virtual CISO concept was born. The virtual CISO, also called a fractional CISO or just a contract cybersecurity expert, is a concept that answers many of these requirements. It's easiest to consider it CISO as a service, as we discuss service-based cloud offerings. But of course, this is a contract or a human-focused service delivery. You're talking about offering companies of almost any size the benefits of a true CISO delivered virtually and tailored for specific cybersecurity needs. CSO Online says, contracting a virtual CISO can be far more cost-effective than hiring a full-timer. They can fill in where you need it the most, helping pull together your security policies, guidelines, and standards. I would add on to that, helping do all of the above with a true risk management-focused cybersecurity strategy in mind, as opposed to only a tactical and operational approach to cybersecurity. I would add further a multidimensional approach, but we'll talk more about that here in a few minutes. The value proposition is enormous. The full range of CISO support can be offered by virtual CISOs, by fractional Chief Information Security Officers, for sometimes 40% of the cost of actually hiring a full-time CISO. This is a phenomenally attractive value proposition, a tremendous cost savings for a very high level of delivery and a very high level of experience. So let's dig a little deeper into what is special about the virtual CISO concept when it comes to a true cybersecurity strategy. I mentioned earlier the dimensions of cybersecurity, and this, I believe, is where truly experienced CISOs, as opposed to tacticians, have a truly powerful impact on helping businesses of all sizes. There's the human dimension, people and culture. There's the operations dimension, process, policy, and compliance. Then there's the technology dimension, systems, networks, and data. Now, many general consultants and many very good cybersecurity engineers and tacticians focus primarily on technology, on systems and data. And by that, I mean they really usually focus on tools. Now, this is not to diminish the importance of cybersecurity tools. Information systems are still systems. We are almost always dealing primarily, and in the beginning, with computers, with laptops, with mobile phones, with databases, with cloud, with hybrid, with private cloud. We're dealing with technology that needs systems protection and that need systems engineering and integration and that need absolutely tactical, technology-focused cybersecurity. But there are other areas outside of technology, outside of systems, networks, and data that are just as important. Good consultants can be tremendous when it comes to working on that technology dimension, helping you with systems, networks, and data, and even helping you strategically from that perspective. But the human dimension, people, and cybersecurity culture, and the operations dimension, process, policy, and compliance, they are all needed to complete the picture, to complete a strategy for cybersecurity in almost any environment. This brings us to a very important and unfortunately sometimes shocking statement. You see, cybersecurity is not just an IT problem. Now, I'm going to put on my wishful thinking hat and say that in this environment, here at CACS 2020, many of you watching this video who would have been sitting for this breakout session in person had COVID-19 not occurred would say, oh no, we understand that. That's very much a given. And that is a wonderful truth that has become the norm a little bit within the cybersecurity and compliance discipline. But outside of the walls of an engagement filled with professionals who understand cyber risk and compliance and audit and accountability, this is still a new concept. Business managers and the rest of the C-suite, boards of directors, this is a statement that still needs to very much be a focus of education. Cybersecurity is not IT. Cybersecurity should never be considered to be an IT function, and cybersecurity should almost never be owned in the same way that a CIO's function is owned. It's much more broad than IT. It covers dimensions that go far broader than IT. And so the structure of how one approaches cybersecurity strategy needs to be much more broad, truly enterprise-wide, multidimensional, and truly broad-scoped in order to not fall into the trap of being considered purely an IT problem. Let's take a deeper dive into what I mean when I say cybersecurity is not just an IT problem by looking in depth at each of these three dimensions. And then we're going to tie this all in to how a virtual CISO brings an understanding of the broad scope of cybersecurity to enterprises of any size in such a way that allows true cyber strategy to be implemented regardless of the size or complexity of the business. And then we're going to build on that even further with how this might help address the true future of cybersecurity. So first, the technology dimension, systems, networks, and data. There are somewhere between 18 and 22 different cybersecurity domains that deal with technology, depending on who you ask and how things are categorized. But here is just a short list of many of the technology dimension issues that focus here in this part of cybersecurity. Perimeter architectures are, of course, critical, especially now that our perimeters are very rarely just corporate buildings, but our perimeters are in the cloud and they are hybrid perimeters. Endpoint will always be important, even if we're using virtual endpoints and virtual desktops. We still have laptops and mobiles and Surface tablets that we're working on that need to be protected and need to be monitored and managed because they're targets. We still have servers, no matter what type of server they are. And of course, now we have serverless environments. That means the cloud environment around our serverless applications also need to be monitored and protected. We've got the need for identity and access management. That's never going to be a solved topic because as soon as we come up with a new and more novel approach to protecting identity and protecting access, the attacker community comes up with a new way to try to exploit it. And in so many ways, identity and access management is an aspect of this technology dimension that quickly crosses over into the human factors dimension, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Business continuity and disaster recovery. I almost want to remove those words from this technology dimension slide because there should, here in the days of COVID-19, those terms I hope are not even used in the future. Instead, it should be secure business continuity, SBC, and secure disaster recovery. Because BC and DR are of no value if they become the weak link in the chain, if they become the risk that takes down operations or bankrupts a company after a breach. Penetration testing, vulnerability management, network security, application security, if you're in an environment where applications are developed, where they are produced to be sold or developed internally, tremendous focus must be placed on the technology aspects of application security management, how your software development lifecycle needs to be secured from the foundational aspects right on up to the management aspects. And of course, data protection. And that includes privacy, that includes all the CIA triad of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We must protect our data. We have to have encryption schemes in place that stay ahead of the ability for attackers to evade, to go around. It's very rarely nowadays trying to breach the actual encryption technologies. No, it's much easier to simply evade and go around them, to get the data before it's encrypted, or to get the encryption keys because of poor management and storage and simply return it to plain text. Technology evaluation and on and on and on. From firewalls to antivirus on one end, DR, remote access, the list is tremendous. The technology dimension, again, this is the normal starting point for most cybersecurity engineers and tacticians, and with good reason. All of these aspects are foundational and are critical to cybersecurity. But this is one part of a three-legged stool. This is one dimension of information security. To ignore the others is to invite a tremendous amount of risk and potential failure to your business. Next, let's discuss the operations dimensions: policy, process, and compliance. There's a tremendous amount of issue and focus here that needs to be integrated with that technology dimension. But unfortunately, some of these aspects go without much attention. Enterprise cybersecurity strategy, actually having a defined cybersecurity program, falls into this dimension of concern. It's easy to have a very good tactical and technology-based set of tools and operations to keep your enterprise afloat and safe, and it's a good thing. But in many environments, you will benefit tremendously by not only defining all of those operations within policy and process, but you also may be forced to document and manage all of those operations within policy and process for compliance reasons. Now, unfortunately, in many circles, compliance is considered sort of a bad word. It's a threat. It's a must-have, and therefore a check-the-box mentality sometimes becomes the norm, where we have to do this, so it's simply going to be done. I look at it from a different perspective. The driver of compliance management, of course, is just supposedly to make sure that you're doing what you're doing should be doing already, that you're actually doing the things that define what good cybersecurity, privacy management, data protection, systems protection, what those best practices are. So if you are structuring a cybersecurity program in the right way, in a multidimensional way, in a strategic way, from the very beginning, compliance is no longer such a heavy burden. So we have things like cyber policies and, of course, processes and procedures. We're considering things like vendor management. Third-party security is becoming such a hot topic, and I'm so thankful that it is, because the risks of insecure and poorly managed third parties to any enterprise environment, increasingly so for small and mid-sized businesses, cannot be overstated. Understanding your vendors and making sure to do your due diligence on them and to regularly communicate with them about their cybersecurity posture is critical. Imagine right now, again, during the times of COVID-19, you may be a mid-sized business with 10 or 20 partners that you operate with that help you succeed. They are also implementing their business continuity plans right now and are having a mass work from home operation potentially. Is their business continuity plan a secure business continuity plan? Or have they just opened up the door to hundreds of new threats that will then be able to find their way into your network or your systems or towards your people in social engineering and in phishing or whaling because of their lack of cybersecurity? And so their weakness becomes your tremendous risk, your large-scale problem potentially. Vendor management is a process and procedure and strategy component that has nothing to do with technology or systems or data, but it is a process aspect. We also look at risk management processes, getting to the point in your cybersecurity posture where you're no longer chasing after the cybersecurity tail, but where you are taking the time to look forward and conceive of upcoming threats, document risks, and plan mitigations. We look at vulnerability management from a policy and process and compliance perspective. Cyber return on investment, cyber ROI, is such a wonderful topic that is too often not engaged. The ROI prospect of investing in cybersecurity is almost always tremendously positive, which is why it boggles my mind why more cybersecurity experts don't trumpet cyber ROI from the rooftops of their buildings, because it is always very, very positive. A high return on investment comes when you look at the cost avoidance, at the protection, and at the business enablement that cybersecurity program strategy provides. And then you also have cyber and privacy compliance directly doing the work to report for compliance reasons to outside entities, managing security operations centers, SOCs, or network operations centers, NOCs, either internally or as a service, having breach insurance. Cybersecurity breach insurance, of course, is growing in importance all the time. It has a very vital role. And more, there are so many aspects of breach insurance that are value-added dimensions to how those protections are offered that Again, a very well-versed CISO can understand and can help educate an enterprise and help guide and help review different offerings. But if that experience level is not there, if it is a cybersecurity tactician or an operations person, they may not have visibility into something like the dynamic world of breach insurance. Again, identity and access management and cyber KPI, having outcome reporting processes for key performance initiatives, both for internal, for the board of directors, and for outside partnering companies for private equity. All of this matters. In summary, compliance really needs to not be that check the box activity. It needs to emerge from that comprehensive strategy that a CISO can provide. Then finally, we get to the third dimension, the human dimension, people and culture. And I save this for last because it is so often overlooked. This is the slide that gets skipped. The human dimension is by far the most often missed piece of the cybersecurity strategy puzzle. It may very well be the most important piece. There are so many aspects of the human dimension, but everyone understands one of the most critical components, and that's social engineering and phishing. Now, there are technologies, of course, and systems that help us with social engineering and phishing attempts and whaling attempts and smishing, SMS text phishing, and all the other types of attacks. But so much of the true protection that the enterprise needs comes from education, training, and culture. So it starts at the top, executive education. A good CISO will make sure that the executives of whatever company they are supporting understand cybersecurity at a very strong level, that they are not the ones who simply don't understand the risk and don't understand the issues. Executives should be the ones leading the way with setting what we call a positive cyber culture within their businesses. And then you move into actually having your staff trained both on cybersecurity and on privacy and all the threats that are out there. And this needs to go further than just being an annual training where everyone sits and reads a slide deck or there's one whole meeting for 12 months. If that is the norm in your organization, then I'm here to unequivocally tell you that's not enough and not the right way to establish a cybersecure culture. Training needs to be in various formats. It needs to be ongoing and in a regular occurring way. And it needs to cover all of the dimensions that we're talking about here. Train people not only on their direct threats, but also on how their participation with helping technology and operations stay secure is critical to the survival of business. You also have to focus on hiring support, on supporting HR in how cybersecurity strategy is implemented, dealing with all the different aspects of mentoring and cyber culture assessing and cyber culture improvements, having internal cybersecurity initiatives, even having a corporate cyber brand. This is a powerful set of tools that can tremendously elevate the level of cybersecurity awareness and the actual intelligence, the cyber intelligence of your workforce. So much of the risk comes from human factors. To skip this aspect of cybersecurity, to not focus on this aspect of cyber strategy, is far too great a risk. This is, unfortunately, the often missing dimension of cyber strategy. So that was a lot, right? There's a lot of different aspects within those three dimensions, this three-legged stool of true enterprise cybersecurity strategy, particularly if you are a small or mid-sized business. Here's the question. Do you have years to wait for your information security program to become optimized while you train or try to force tacticians and operations-focused cybersecurity engineers to become chief information security officer level operators? Can your enterprise afford the risk of having partially experienced or lightly trained expertise managing your cybersecurity? Would one handle the roofing contractor for your building this way? Say there's a constant rainstorm going on. There's a hurricane coming. You've got gale force winds hitting your building. Would you handle your physical security in this way? Finding someone who you simply had on hand and saying, you know what, we need you to go take care of the roof. Please, because obviously there's a hurricane here, water's pouring in, all of our equipment, all of our systems, our people are at risk. We just need someone who can do this. Even if you're just barely keeping up, no one would handle their physical security this way, right? And yet this is how potentially even a greater risk in the world of information security is often handled. Find someone who knows a little bit about it, train, and hopefully they'll catch up over time, or at least they'll just keep patching each hole in the roof as the water pours in, and then frantically run to the next gaping hole as the wind tears off another portion of the roof. This is not a good approach for business. It wouldn't work for your physical facility. It definitely shouldn't be used for your logical and information systems operations. Cybersecurity embodies way too much risk to be managed by on-the-job training, to be managed by piecemeal execution. How do we know this is true? Just go and scan any cybersecurity news website for what the newest breach alerts are. All of these breaches, all of these failures, so many companies going under, so much loss and damage, endless lists of companies with their internal data posted onto public websites because it's been breached and no one knew it for 6 months or a year or 2 years even. All of this is a direct result of what we're dealing with when it comes to having true cyber strategy and having cyber expertise ready to protect our businesses. We're lagging behind the curve when it comes to cyber expertise and true strategy and comprehensive protection and multidimensional approaches. But unfortunately, it's even worse than that. You see, given the nature of the threat that we've already discussed, how it's ever-changing and omnidirectional, given the nature of connected operations, how we're ever-growing in scope and sophistication, given the nature of compliance, which is constantly ramping up, and the nature of cyber expertise, which is tremendously lacking, combined with requirements that are far beyond just IT, that span these 3 dimensions of human factors, of operations, and of technology and systems. All of this combines to create a level of challenge in the cybersecurity landscape that even experienced CISOs find daunting. There's a very well-known statistic out there that says most chief information security officers full-time in the enterprise last about 18 months before they are burned out and leave for another opportunity or another discipline of work. That is the terrifying number, but I can speak as a CISO to just how tremendous the stress is and how difficult it is to successfully achieve this level of cyber strategy in your enterprise, given all of these factors, given the threat, given the pressures, given the challenges. So in today's cybersecurity environment, even great CISOs are frequently struggling and can often benefit from virtual CISO support themselves. Even great CISOs nowadays are reaching out for fractional CISO support to help them do more and do better at capturing this entire broad range of cyber strategy implementation. Imagine yourself in the shoes of a traditional corporate CISO, full-time, helping your business manage cybersecurity threats. As an internal corporate CISO, do you see the issues, the risks, the 3-dimensional, multidimensional aspects of strategy across all industries and across different domains with the perspective of lots of other enterprises? The human dimension, your operations dimension, your technology dimension? As an internal corporate CISO, do you understand how those dimensions are managed across different industries and across different domains? Or do you really just see what's happening inside your business? Well, the answer is obvious. As an internal CISO, you see exactly what you are managing. You get to see and understand your business necessarily, and you structure your cyber strategy to successfully protect it as best you can. But a virtual CISO comes in the door with all of the aspects of the rest of their experience, possibly supporting a handful of different clients at the same time, fractionally, and bringing to the table a broad range of true and accurate knowledge, different industries, different domains, how different challenges that may be similar have been successfully or unsuccessfully managed in other enterprises. What a tremendous knowledge base. This becomes a powerful source of information for that internal CISO. They are seeing and learning that this virtual CISO can bring a lot of boots on the ground knowledge about what works and what doesn't work to that enterprise, tremendously lightening the load for that internal CISO, bringing broad scope application across the dimensions to cyber strategy. In today's cybersecurity environment, even great CISOs really strongly benefit from virtual CISO support. This brings us to our next really big important point. Cybersecurity is too important to be left in the hands of internal personnel alone. The reason I hammered so hard on these different points of how tremendous the threat is, how complex strategy needs to be, how many dimensions and aspects and domains there are to cover, is because of this reality. CISOs who are actually operating in their fields know this naturally. They know that not only is cyber a lot bigger than IT, and not only is cyber incredibly important now for business success, for business survival, but they're increasingly understanding that cybersecurity is far too critical to be left in the hands of just your internal personnel. Teaming, outsourcing, getting expert support from outside of the four walls of your enterprise is becoming no longer optional. It's becoming absolutely necessary. Now, this is not in any way to diminish the importance of the role of that internal corporate CISO. They are absolutely critical. But even in the best case scenarios, the internal CISO is limited in the scope and reach of cybersecurity risk management. True cyber strategy, which encompasses, again, far more than just IT, and that covers all of the dimensions of cybersecurity, human factors, operational dimension, and technology dimension aspects, across many domains and across different industries, and at the appropriate level of expertise, this can only be accomplished with best practice insights gained from many businesses by the virtual CISO's value proposition. So that's really the key. Affordable, fractional cybersecurity expertise for cyber strategy optimization. This allows a true boost to how cyber strategy, how all aspects of strategic and tactical and operational cybersecurity are used, are leveraged, and are built within the enterprise. But now let's look again at the small and mid-sized business issue. The vast numbers of SMBs, small and mid-sized businesses, which again, they are the majority of the businesses in the world, they have all of the cybersecurity threats, all of the cybersecurity worries and problems. They're using the cloud. They are mobile. They have vulnerability management issues. They have pen test issues. They have compliance issues galore. All of the problems, none of the resources, and none of the support. They don't have a CISO at all. They have an IT manager, a director of IT, with 3, 4, 5 people on their staff maybe to do the entire job. And primarily those are operations people, tacticians. They are keeping the business afloat. It may not be possible for the tens of thousands, for the hundreds of thousands of small and mid-sized businesses out there to navigate cybersecurity successfully in any other way than by employing virtual CISOs. This is a question of access. The virtual CISO concept brings access to advanced cyber practices to the masses of companies that need this type of help and need it immediately and don't have any way to affordably secure it. For enterprises of all sizes and types, that virtual CISO is the future of cyber strategy. Let's walk again through the 3 dimensions. Again, the technology dimension, systems, network, and data. We've seen these different domains. We discussed them earlier. Consider them quickly for a moment. Cloud services, IDAM, access control, penetration and vulnerability management, application security, data protection, tech eval. all of these different aspects of the technology dimension. Does the typical internal CISO read articles, attend conferences like this one, talk to peers? Of course they do. Is that helpful? Yes. But do they integrate an expert who's managed the tech dimension 10 times, 20 times successfully, who brings 5 different corporate success stories of how various technologies were integrated in a unique and satisfactory way to strategically support technology dimension concerns? Obviously, there is a tremendous benefit to bringing in that expert who can cover all of these aspects, not with just information from articles and from even wonderful conferences like this, but from actually achieving a certain level of successful technology dimension implementation. Then there's the operations dimension: policy, process, and compliance. We went over these. Vendor management, such a critical area, managing your third parties and being able to respond when you are a third party being managed and when your second party partners are sending you questionnaires about your cyber policy and when you might lose a partnership because your cyber program is not up to par and they have options to go with another partner with a much better set of responses to a given cybersecurity questionnaire. Risk management, cyber ROI, enterprise security architecture. Enterprise architecture is a big deal. Enterprise security architecture is no less so. Breach insurance, cyber KPIs, on and on and on. The best case, your CISO downloads templates for policy and procedures and chases after best practices as well as they can. Or do they engage an expert who's lived those best practices repeatedly, who's maybe done a set of policy and program implementation for cybersecurity a dozen times just in the past year, versus a CISO who's doing it maybe for the first time or second time? The value proposition, again, of the virtual CISO is enormous. And then the human dimension, people and culture. Again, this most missed piece of the puzzle. Why is it the most often missed piece of the cybersecurity puzzle? Well, an embedded virtual CISO brings immediate expertise to understanding what the human factors dimension is all about because they've done it before if they're a good virtual CISO. In other words, often this aspect is missed by your internal CISO, by your well-meaning and really well-trained internal IT manager or IT staff because it is the last to be engaged. Again, that's why we put this dimension last in the lineup. Sad but true. It should be first because it's so often overlooked. But systems and technology, that's a natural. That's an automatic. Processes, policy, compliance, sometimes these are forced. They have to happen. The human factors, the human dimension, understanding what it is and how to address it. This is not often a skill set that technology-focused people, that tacticians in the technology space or in the business process space often understand. Engaging with a virtual CISO who's had to manage this dimension before becomes an incredible gain for the enterprise. Because again, as an internal CISO, I may have never worked in this arena. I may have never actually done in-person training on my own or structured a corporate cyber brand or worked to do executive education and sit down with my board and talk to them in a way that they can understand about board level risk management and cybersecurity. So you find a virtual CISO to come alongside someone like me who's never done those things or who would like help in doing them because my schedule is full. I have a full-time job protecting the enterprise. And in that small and mid-sized business where there is no such thing as a full-time cybersecurity person, how critical is that virtual CISO who can bring this to the table? So once again, and in closing, cybersecurity is too important to be left in the hands of cybersecurity personnel alone. Internal personnel are absolutely required. You have to have people who are helping you manage all of the information-focused aspects of your business and helping protect them. But the landscape is too hazardous. The problems, the risks too great to leave cybersecurity in the hands of your internal personnel alone. regardless of whether you are a giant business or you are a small or mid-sized business, regardless of your industry, regardless of your strategic level of understanding of cybersecurity. No matter where you are, there are different aspects of a truly dynamic, multidimensional cybersecurity program that can benefit greatly by having virtual CISOs engage. And for this reason, I can very easily assert the virtual CISO is the future of cyber strategy. All of the problems are only growing. The risks, the threats, and threat actors are only increasing. Is the talent pool increasing? Not nearly fast enough. Is the experience level of internal personnel growing fast enough to keep pace with the threats, with the compliance needs, with the risk, both financial and operationally? Absolutely not. These reasons all combine to point to this undeniable fact. The virtual CISO is the future of cyber strategy. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and attention. This has been a wonderful opportunity for me. If you have any questions at all, please make sure and submit them. I'd be happy to answer any questions and all about these different aspects of cybersecurity and the virtual CISO. Thank you all. I hope you're staying safe and staying well. I look forward to seeing many of you in the future. Take care.